then they become real and robust enough to actually do something to solve a problem. And then the way they scale isn't because we just throw a bunch of money at it. It's because a whole bunch of people join together to execute on that idea. So it's not that our best work is collaborative. It's that all work is collaborative.
Nilofer Merchant is co-founder of the Intangible Labs and ranked among the top 50 most influential management thinkers in the world. She's led at companies from Apple to Autodesk, personally launched over 100 products, netting $18 billion in revenue, and her TED Talk has been referenced 300 million times. Her latest book, Our Best Work, dismantles the invisible norms that limit performance. Today, Nilofer shares why the high-impact player ideology actually makes you exploitable, and why the breakthrough comes when you stop asking, "Will you help me?" and start asking, "Do you care about this problem too?" Welcome, Nilofer.
Yay! So glad to be here with you too.
So, Nilofer, you have written several books at this point, and your latest book, Our Best Work, I understand you wrote with a concussion.
I did.
Tell me more.
So I've had a concussion now for slightly over 2.5 years. And to give you a sense, right, because sometimes people use the word concussion and it lasts like 4 days. And so to give you a sense, I couldn't walk for 6 months. I lost 40% of my hearing in my ear. I lost the ability for my eyes to focus. So it was a crazy time because I had signed with a book agent in June and then I fell in July. So I turned to the book agent and said, I understand if you want to move on to other projects and people because I just couldn't imagine how I was even going to function again. And then she was like, well, you're talking pretty coherently most days. So how about when you're feeling it, you can record a story? And then a girlfriend of mine, she said, your voice when you speak on stages, because she's known me for 20-some years, and the voice that you use when you write are actually two different voices. And I'm very curious why. And I was like, I actually think I know, which is when I'm writing, I first prove the point. And then, because I really want to make sure it's locked and solid and considered and all that. And then when I'm speaking, I know because it's already written down that I don't need to do that level of specificity. So I just say what's true. And both the book agent and this friend is like, do you need to prove yourself so much? Kind of thing. So the combination of being able to tell the story as it came out of me and changing this perspective of I don't need to prove my worth, change the voice that came out for the book to be so much more true, so much richer for it. And so what a weird way to have a book just so deeply speak the truth because I couldn't even function. And so I think I need another concussion if I ever write another book.
Well, let's not go that far, but I do think we are talking some best work here, Nilofer. So, I think the insight is that when we have the opportunity to take a different perspective and to maybe be forced to do something in a different way that isn't our norm, sometimes that can emerge within us some really powerful things. And I am excited to think about that with you today, but I'm also thinking there's a real message in there for our listeners who are all starting to ask themselves a lot of these questions around work, like, how am I going to function when the tools I've used in the past maybe are irrelevant or unavailable to me, and maybe I have to think about going about it in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a beautiful context. And I will say one other lesson was that when the book agent said, I bet you could do it this way. And she was just trying to figure out how to work with me instead of saying, we have to do it this way with Scribner or whatever the protocols of the past have been. It's like, given where we are now, what is it we could do? And I think that just generative space might be also the way we think about the AI question, right? Which is, given where we are now, what are our possibilities instead of thinking what's missing?
Right. Oh, yeah. I love that. And I love the fact that it was a human collaboration that came up with the solution. You were able to reach out to others and people were providing
ideas for you. So I love that. So our best work highlights 24 limiting norms and, in contrast, success indicators or leading indicators, rather. And so it's chock full of 24 of these great concepts and then your own experiences and stories with each one. It's really quite an incredible corpus of knowledge and insight. And so on the show today, we really wanted to hone in on one of them so we could go pretty deep. And so we selected chapter 19. Do you want to share a little bit about the limiting norm and what chapter 19 is all about?
The title is actually perfect. Stop making it all about you. And it's really taking apart this notion that we've been taught, which is you need to be an A player. And I think that gives us a real distortion of how all work, going back to our last point, with the concussion is it's not that the best work happens collaboratively, it's that all work happens collaboratively. And then the quality of that collaboration changes the uplift. And so we have to focus not on the player, but on the play. And if you get all the people then, orienting their body towards the collective, we start to see the game really differently. And the obsession with high impact players really causes people to do the worst of individualism, the worst of competing, the worst of the story of the bear, right? You don't have to outrun, what is it?
You don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun all the other people.
Everybody else, yeah.
Right? And I'm like, well, I don't know how many times I've said that in my life of like, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun my colleagues, right? But what that actually, the metaphor breaks down as soon as you think about survival as more than you. And you start to think, oh, I've got a child to protect, and as soon as you add a level of complexity into the model of I have grandma and I have a village, and then you start to go, oh, actually, it's not about outrunning each other, but figuring out how do we solve for the situation.
Yeah, I love that. One of our pod guests, Dave Liu, talked a lot about this abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And I think the idea that there is a finite path and a finite number of A players is really where we all get missignaled. And I actually think one of the things I was reflecting on today as preparing for this discussion was this isn't a place that I think hits high achievers more than most, because early on your signaling of high achievement is really the best. You got the A grade, you were the best in the class, or you were the best on your team, or you were the best in this or that framing. And you started to take in that feedback of, okay, that is what achievement looks like. And to your point, I think when we start to talk about work, that is a huge missignaling and getting clear on the point of work is a collective or a team sport, and the value of that you're producing is a collective or a team thesis, I think really does ground in clarity of what are you achieving and what does good look like. So I love the fact that you're bringing forward the systems problem of that narrative.
So now in the book, you bring forward a personal story, a bit of a revelation or an epiphany, where you had this great job, high impact. You were high impact, a kind of a fixer, and then things didn't work out so well. Can you share the story with us?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It's the opening story of 19, and it's so I am probably, just to situate you, I have run a division at Apple. I have gone to a startup and done, help that company go from zero to exit. And then I am between gigs and I get recruited into Autodesk, and which has been in the CAD space traditionally. And Carol Bartz, who was formerly CEO of Sun, I know, right? And ended up becoming CEO of Yahoo. So it really tightened, right, in that industry. And she personally asked me to come take this job. And I am maybe 28, 29 years old in the scene. And she was like, come be the chief of staff and run operations for the Americas. I took the division from 200 to 300 million to give you a sense of just sort of size. And she'd call me every morning with like whatever problem was the problem of her thing. She'd call me and she wouldn't even say hello, by the way. She would just be like, what the fuck is wrong with, and by the way, I always had a swear word in the sentence. What the fuck is wrong with X? And all of a sudden my day would become about what's wrong with X, and more importantly, what was the fix, and then who did I need to pull all together, and then what was the recommendation, and blah, 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 blah. And so that's the context of the job. And then I am then responsible, therefore, for setting the Americas number. So 3 regions, I'm responsible for actually setting the number and achieving the number, which, as you know from a revenues role, big, big job. And at one point, we're going through the board approval process for what the next year's budget and so resourcing, et cetera, is. And I'm having a dispute with someone on the team. And this person basically wants to preserve existing programs before investing in the new. And I'm saying, listen, if you don't invest in the new, it never actually gets off the ground. Equally valid, things. But because I believed in this high impact player modality, I was like, well, if one of us is going to win, it's going to be me, because if I believe in certain things and I believe the number is a number kind of thing, like, let's go. And so I rallied and did the arguments and took people aside and, all of the sort of hustling that you do when you're trying to win a argument and a conversation there, and actually got it to the board. The board actually applauded, which you both know boards do not applaud. So it is a really big deal that we got to a board approval with applause that just said, you guys are so on it. The Americas is so on it. So I got called in the next day and I was expecting the attaboy. And what I got instead was, listen, the way you did it caused the team to not trust you. And so it might risk execution. And so I basically want to take you off this role. And I felt like a failure. Like, I've done what you've asked me to do. I've done it in record time. I'm delivering all the numbers. I'm a young person in a role that is unbelievably set up to fail, and I'm totally delivering. So I'm like, why would you not give me the gold star? But here's the implication. She got everything she wanted. And so that's the other part about being a high impact player, is it rewards a very particular profile and not actually everyone who's a high impact player. So I think that's like something that when we get advice that doesn't serve every group, but we think it's good advice, we really ought to question that one. That's the first thing, because there's a bunch of advice in management books that actually harm women, but don't harm men. But the larger point is the play was not the focal point. It became about an interpersonal problem, as seems like an interpersonal problem, instead of the capability of the organization to do innovation well. And I define success as your ability to do the right thing more than once, right? To grow over time. And so, yeah, they got the dunk shot from me, but the next year wasn't going to be set up because there wasn't going to be that kind of follow through. And so when we do players over play, that's what we're saying is one success at a time is enough, instead of what is our capacity as a winning team to actually repeat that success.
So, of course, you came at this from an individual perspective in terms of what it meant for you and how you fit into the system. But I'm wondering, where were the structural failures there? Like, what were the incentives misaligned? Like, what could Carol have done to prevent this from happening? And to, give you the right incentives to focus on the play rather than being the A player?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's happening in most rooms is the ability to sort of have one person go run the play down the field gives the CEO someone to bet on, right? So they basically say, Nilofer, you're the person I'm going to call at 7 a.m. And I'm going to basically bust you if you don't go fix it. So it gives her like a person to press on. So it gives really high control. She doesn't have to go talk to 8 people. She gets to just beat up on me to go talk to 8 people. So it delegates, it uses control, but it gets the issue off of their plate and a hero to bet on. It also seduces all of our collective egos, right? Because we get to be like, oh, I'm important to this person. But what it also does is it pitches us all against each other. So every person who did not get the 7 a.m. phone call wondered why I was calling them. Right? Why is this relatively junior person compared to Carol calling? So she's saying Carol called her this morning, so on and so on. So now we're divided as a team because people are having a conversation about why wasn't I included in the first call? Right? And so the division allows everyone to be played against each other because the idea is the more competitive we are, the more we will actually win. That's the fundamental underlying philosophy behind the A-player idea of I will have Meg compete with Amy, who will compete with Nilofer, and best person wins. But it means that everyone will exhaust themselves in the process so that, they will maybe cross the finish line. But as a business, I win if one of you crosses the finish line. And the rest of you two fall down, whatever, I still got what I wanted. Right? So the business always wins, even if we're empty husks of humans, like 2 out of 3 of us are empty husks of humans, barely able to crawl over that finish line. So it benefits them. And it's a form of sort of betting on, 8 different players on the team and saying, which one of you wins? Cool.
So perhaps unwittingly, she was creating division amongst her team.
Absolutely. And by the way, this is the point of all these stories, including my own, right, where I'm basically saying that I threw my friend underneath the bus and then Carol was throwing me under the bus. What I'm actually saying is the problem is systemic. You could say I was a shitty person in that moment, of course. But that defies what's actually happening, which is the entire system has told us that our job is to compete vis-a-vis each other and to claim the gold star and to claim that A report so we can feel better about ourselves. But that's something we were taught, which is a beautiful thing because we can go, oh, is there another idea we'd rather learn?
That's right. That's right. And I especially love your insight. I tend to talk about it a slightly different way, which is I believe that the majority of leadership advice is written and benefiting the male perspective. And I don't think that's malicious. I think that's just pattern matching against a subset of pattern. And so I think it is really important for women and for minorities to ask themselves every time, are those tips going to work for me? And in knowing that they won't, what might be a better approach? So back to the fact that this is a systems problem and not necessarily an individual problem, I really do feel like I want to dig on, what is a better path for the leader to take, for Carol's position to take, to still protect 2 things that I think are available in the current structure. And one you mentioned, which is that the business will win because the work is going to get done in maybe a more cutthroat way, but definitely will get done. But I think the second thing is there is a need when you're running a large business and a large team to be able to have, a directly responsible individual that you can trust to take on a project and to make things happen. In my mind, and I'd love to get you to disagree or help me understand where I'm wrong. In my mind, in a perfect world, you have multiple people that are capable of driving big outcomes and achieving things that you can count on and trust. But I think you build that cohesion across by not making that the only path to relevance or importance or whatever, because the thing that was getting cut out was people feeling less for not being the one that was tapped, and people feeling the need for the gold star to give them affirmation that they are achieving something that matters for the business. I think it's those threads that I'm really interested to pull with you is what do we replace to help achieve what the business needs, which is, hey, I don't want to have to like have myself be calling everyone. I want everybody to feel really clear and aligned, but together to achieve the bigger goals.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, Meg, that you're pointing to is the difference between accountability and ownership. So accountability assumes singularity also. It's just another flavor of the A player. It assumes that someone has to lead. And one of the things I've been really working on with teams is something can lead. Meaning our shared objective of whatever that is, right? It actually can take the organizing principle. So let's just use that specific situation of Carol basically calling me and then I'm having to rally other people. It could be what she actually does is has a morning call with all the different parts of the team and says, the thing that's really bugging me today is X. And someone can go, yep, here's what I know. And another person can say, yep, that's where I know. And we agree on what the something is that we need to solve in that construct. And we've already then started to organize ourselves and kind of recognizing that each of us has a role to play. And it was Mary Parker Follett, who was actually the first management scientist. She introduced this idea of the law of the situation. And she said, if we can understand the situation, then we can actually understand what is our collective role in it. And then how do we use that to then kind of figure out what is the best organizational model for us to go make something happen? So instead of someone being in charge, which kind of leads us to singularity, something can be in charge, which allows the shared ownership. So I think we've been trained to, I got to hold someone accountable. And I'm like, actually, if everyone has ownership over the goal, everyone is accountable. And I think the piece that we struggle with in business is we don't really have good shared ownership. So then it gets diffused. And so we don't know how to create that model. But shared ownership is possible. And we can actually have metrics around that. So instead of saying, does the singular persons are carried across the finish line, we could say, are we giving ourselves the spaciousness to think about problems together and solving them together? That would be a metric that would let us go, oh, we can solve anything. What is the sign right behind you? Everything is figure outable. Everything is figure outable. But I don't have to do it through my own individual effort. We can do it.
I had this experience leading a team at SAP SuccessFactors. I had all of the different product leaders for different areas and design and as just a bunch of different functions under me, and they were all running their own teams and doing their own thing really, really well. But we weren't really a team, like as a leadership team. And so Meg had recommended this group called the Table Group to come in and work with my team. And the whole premise of what they do is really reestablishing that first and foremost, this is your team. And then secondarily, you have the team that reports to you, right? And so it was really about creating that cohesion and understanding, what people's strengths were and what their desires were, so that we could leverage each other's strengths and be able to solve problems collectively. And it was super powerful. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about, Nilofer.
It is.
Yeah.
And Steve Jobs, he has both pros and cons to his personality, right? But one of the things he was really known for is he got his exec team to actually have really hard conversations together. And I would say that 99% of Apple's success is not what it is attributed to and the great PR effort that's been done to create the hero effect, but that ability to build a cohesive ecosystem, the Apple ecosystem that locks you in and that gives you everything you need so you don't have to leave and stuff, was a function of that interactive leadership. It was something, not someone. And so there's other asterisks next to Jobs, and we could talk about that. But that particular piece of his ability to build that team is exactly what you did, exactly what we all need to do.
Now, in the book, I think you wrote, these metrics measure ways to dominate and do not capture significance. This shift is not just words, it is the difference between chasing power and chasing purpose. Power asks, how much can I control? Purpose asks, what are we creating together? So when you're talking about metrics specifically, what would we be changing in terms of the metrics that are being tracked today versus the metrics that we should be tracking going forward to accomplish purpose?
I often joke that I read the internet so no one else has to. And because, I'm just sort of obsessed with stories. And so a couple of years back, I started really following the U.S. women's national team. There's this player, Abby Wambach, who became a
We're big fans.
Olympic level performer. And one of the things she did was when she scored, she would actually do this thing where she would point directly to the person who had set up the ball, so that she could actually do the score. Everyone's eyes followed the finger and traced it to the person. And it's that to me is the difference between the focus on metric of the player to the play. Because if you can say, how are enough people on the field setting up good passes? Then you actually, you X factor the number of possible goals that you can make if everyone's figuring out, how do I set up the team and how do I, really start playing so I have like 10 ways to score that goal, not just this one random way. And so now you actually go, oh, so what are the ways in business that we can actually set up the success odds so that we actually create more bandwidth and more options for us to be able to score the goal? Well, then you'd be rewarding whatever those set of plays are. And each business and each business model would have a different, right? If you're product centric, you might look differently at it versus if you were customer centric. But you would actually figure out in our business model, how do we actually create the tee-ups that allow us to have more chances to score? That would be a beautiful way. And it would be like one operational way we might think about it is, how do you de-risk the innovation rate? So that more people are going, I could try this, or we could try that. And so it's what Google did when they did the 20% rule for their employees. And they basically said, anyone, can use 20% of their time to do projects. Right? And then what it did is it actually created a whole bunch of little bets. And any of those could go on to be big bets. And in fact, Gmail, which, we almost everyone uses today, was one of those tiny little bets. And so how do you actually get everyone focused on the play? It's like, set up a structural model that invites people to do what it is you actually need done, which is innovation. And then you actually benefit from the business, but so does the person. So you're not causing a binary there. And you don't have to have just one winner. You can have multiple winners, which is what Google has done consistently over time. So that's like a way for us to operationalize it.
There was a point where you pointed out the power of a generative question, and I really loved that because it's a very big part of how I think, and what I think really matters is that it oftentimes when we're stuck, it's because we keep following a pattern we already have, and the best way to change a pattern is outside of having a massive structural change that you have no choice, is to start to get curious and to put yourself in situations or with people that can ask you these generative questions that force you to break your existing kind of patterns and look at things in a different way. I think that this conversation would really benefit from that, especially in this moment in time when so much of what companies have to do is to figure out how to navigate a lot of uncertainty. And unlike the Google moment where Google was really, really generating cash at a large rate, so they had an opportunity to do things that were expensive, that I think in today's economy, people are going to be reluctant to do. And I think a lot of companies up until now have been trying to do something similar with their AI initiatives, just like, oh, let everybody kind of explore and play and all of that. And there's been a lot of pushback on that because that's proven to be kind of expensive, a little bit distracting. And that's before we get to the kind of security challenges that we're seeing in this last week. But I think that there's a really powerful thing in between here that I want to make sure people don't dismiss based on the fact that it's hard. So maybe we can talk a little bit about like what are some generative questions that we think businesses can be asking now that are not suggesting that you go off and spend a bunch of money or anything like that, but that help you rethink this concept of how do we elevate purpose in a way that brings that innovation forward.
Beautiful, beautiful on so many levels. I want to remind us that how we even frame those questions and box ourselves in can limit what we generate. So I want to, for a minute, just to hold more gently this question of, do we have the money right now? And do we have a sense of urgency? And can we think more expansively? I just want to kind of move that from maybe we won't be open to new ideas because people are feeling pressure. I just want to tease that apart and kind of put that right next to us and not let it limit our thinking. Okay, so that's one thing. There was a beautiful, a guy who has really reinvented how Hollywood works, and he did it from such a different angle, and he did it with a question. Franklin Leonard, he founded an organization called the Blacklist. And Franklin, when I met him, he told me a story, and he was like 20-something years old, ex-McKinsey consultant, but he was between gigs, and he basically sat on the couch and watched movies, just nonstop. He sat there and said, oh my God, what I love is stories. I love stories. I love films. And so he just kind of got himself to Hollywood and took the most entry-level job. And it turns out, though, that one of the entry-level jobs that people have to do is this thing called coverage, where you read a script and you write like a one-pager overview, and then you go and pitch it to your boss. And so this is actually your job, is to say, I think this would make a great film. And in his entire first year in Hollywood, he got a chance to see The Hunger Games. He got a chance to see a script written specifically for Will Smith, a couple other things. And he actually, Lars and the Doll is actually one of the ones that he saw. And he was so excited about The Hunger Games, which whenever I tell people the story, it just, the audience usually laughs because he went to his bosses and said, I really think this is amazing. And they said, this is a direct quote, female action films don't work. And Hunger Games, of course, became one of the biggest enterprises. But he got that across the board. And of course, Franklin's relatively young. So you're wondering if it's you, right? You don't have enough work experience to go, is it me? Is it them? What's going on? And the answer is it's us, because everyone in the room was being shaped by the question, will it make money? And Franklin actually posited a different question. And he did it. He sent an email he basically found all the people he had been in contact with in his first year. He sent them an email and said, if you send me your best scripts that you love this year, I will set you back an Excel spreadsheet using his McKinsey skills of what I find out. And then everyone wins from sharing this data. And he sends it to 90-some people, and almost everyone responds and sends back a note saying, can I share it with other people? So he gets the data, he aggregates it, he rolls it back out, and goes on vacation, pulls up the best scripts that he does, that he finds from this process, goes on vacation, comes back a week later, and his inbox is full because he's not revealed that it's him that's sending this out. And so people are forwarding and going, look at this. This is like such a great, and to a T, every person who had tried to pitch their bosses a script that then they saw was on this list went back to their bosses and said, listen, this list says it's really good. I said it was really good. And so here's social reinforcement of it's really good. And so let's consider it. And a whole bunch of those films got made. The numbers are staggering. I could probably quote from the book, staggering blockbuster results, won a bunch of Oscars, all sorts of things. And the list has now been around for several years. And so when I was asking Franklin, like, what did he do right? He said, I just shone a bigger spotlight. And I was like, that's not it. And I wasn't trying to insult Franklin by saying that's not it. I was sitting there going, dude, other people can already do that. So I was sitting there trying to decode, what the hell are you actually doing that's different? And what he asked, I just said it in passing about the same way that Franklin really said it in passing, but I really had to slow down and go back. Where in the process was the change made? And he asked people, what scripts did you love? What scripts do you love? And people not worried about whether or not they think it can make money got a chance to identify, here's what I love. And then other people go, I love it too. And all of a sudden, the orientation goes back to with the original genesis of what Hollywood ever wanted to be, right? Before it got sort of sucked under the wheel of we must make profits at every single second of every single moment. Otherwise, we're not going to live. It's a distortion field that caused scarcity to become more important than the original act of value creation.
And I think there's a quote from the book that sums it up really perfectly, Nilofer. You said, people don't join your cause as a favor to you. They join because they care about the same outcome you do. The breakthrough comes when you stop asking, will you help me? And start asking, do you care about this problem too? And that's exactly what happened there, right? He sent that out, and those 90 people didn't respond because they were doing a favor for him. They had the same problem. They were feeling the same need. And so he created a movement, a purpose through that mechanism.
And that's the difference between, power, which is about, I'm going to ask you to do something for me, which is a hierarchical construct. Or if it's reciprocity, it's still about a teeter-tot, right? I will do for you, and then you will do for me. And it's still putting us in a relationship. So it still says the individuals matter. But if we focus on what is the thing we want, it reorients. You can see me actually doing it with my body, right? It reorients everything. And so then, Meg, to go back to your question about AI, I think one of the questions could be, what is the role of humans in an AI-driven world? Another question could be, if we were designing for human optimization in an AI world, what would we design for? Another question could be, if we wanted an economy that was richer or fuller or more complete because of AI, what would be our design criteria? I did a fireside chat up in Redmond, and my colleague who was interviewing me said, okay, if you're an LLM, what is the design principle underlying your LLM? And luckily, what came out of my mouth, I really feel is the truest truth, which is human aliveness. If I design an economy for human aliveness, I will actually solve for joy, I will solve for innovation, and I will solve for an economy that serves all of us in terms of value distribution. So our best work is more expansive, possibly including the earth. Best is about solving meaningful problems, not just about making money. And work becomes more than a job. It is about how each of us uses our capabilities. It's about what is the economy you're building? What is an organizational structure you're building? And then what is the way in which individuals participate in that? And how do we benefit that? I don't find enough people right now articulating those questions, which is why the AI thing feels so ridiculously scary. And I've been around for a while. I have watched the mobile revolution, the PC revolution, the Y2K revolution. In fact, when Google search came out, I remember people going, advertising will never exist again, right? And actually advertising grew. So I've been looking at this going, what is AI actually good at solving for? There's a research paper just came out, and it studied 800 and some, I want to say BCG consultants, and tracked them for 2 years to say, where did they benefit? And the uplift was 3 pieces of data. People were able to get 12% more done. They were able to go 25% faster. And they were able to do 30% better decisions. But if I say, oh, it's going to save me 12% of an employee cost, Altman's model and economics don't play, which is why he has to say it's going to replace everything. Right? It's because he cannot make the economic estimate of invest in AI if it's only going to cause a 12% lift. I think AI is doing something really amazing on a couple fronts. One, I think it replaced Google. They have also reinvented things that are stupidly expensive when, like website design. If you want to do it well, you almost always have to hire a designer. But by the way, there are only so many design models. So I'm like, can you please just program that? And then can I just give you what it is I need and I can have it done in a day instead of a 60-day process or whatever, right? Logo design, all that kind of stuff. So it's also figured out what are some basic things that can just be done faster, better, etc. So one of the things we have to think, okay, so yes, it will buy us something. And the question is, what does it give us more capacity to do? And what can we then add value on? So IKEA is using it for some of their customer service skills and finding that they didn't need, I think the number was 8,000 employees who could be replaced by AI. So there was definitely uplift there. And instead of firing those people, because their governments actually believe in human aliveness being important, they actually turned to all those people and said, oh, we could turn them into designers. Like actually figuring out how to help customers use our stuff better and therefore drive growth. And so I think we have a yes and play. And the question is, how creative can we be? One of the really interesting statistics is that 70% of jobs globally are require absolutely zero creativity. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want that job. I don't want that job. You don't want that job. Nobody wants that job. So if we could have machines do some of that, can we actually go back to doing the good stuff? Can we actually allow someone who has, I don't know, a sense of color to actually help you pick the paints that you want for your home? Or the person who has kinesthetic skills and actually, can we use human capacity so that I'm allowing it to be the food maker if I don't choose to do that, but I get to then write poetry or take a walk in nature. So we got to figure out how. Yeah.
So circling back to going from high impact players to high impact plays, following your revelation at Autodesk, what did you then take with you to your next leadership role? And what sort of advice would you give people in terms of, applying this this advice to their leadership position?
The first thing I did was I kind of got scared about belonging inside an organization because I was like, clearly this does not feel good, right? I did not enjoy that process, but I was really good at driving change. So I went and ended up setting up a consulting company, and then Rubicon was known in the tech sector for doing all these big turnarounds. We helped Symantec defend against Microsoft, which had never been done before. We helped Nokia exit to Microsoft. We helped Adobe become the company they are today. So I did it from the outside, but the question that I had at the very beginning of it is, what is it that lets us actually do like the thing without like losing our soul? I don't want to feel like this anymore. And slowly but surely, probably in the first couple of years, I kind of just kept noticing it's not just that our best work is collaborative, it's that all work is collaborative. And that I just noticed that, oh, well, new and nascent ideas don't ever show up fully formed. They show up like tiny little fledgling birds, and they need to be protected and fed and connected and all that stuff. And then they become real and robust enough to actually do something to solve a problem. And then the way they scale isn't because we just throw a bunch of money at it. It's because a whole bunch of people join together to execute on that idea. So it's not that our best work is collaborative. It's that all work is collaborative. And in fact, the level of collaboration drives the quality of the output. And that is probably if I had to write in one sentence what I've been pursuing now for nearly 30 years, it is that. It's like, oh, if that drives everything, then how do we start doing more of it?
Beautiful.
Love that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Nilofer. I think the advice is so timely. Obviously, there's a lot of leaders who are trying to do this better. And I think there's a lot of those of us in the workforce hoping that we can be the change so that the future looks better than the past. So thank you for giving so many great ideas in your book, and maybe help people know where they can find you and where the book is. Yes.
It's color-coded to the outfit. Can you see that?
Lovely. Well done.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So the book is available everywhere books are sold.
And I listened to it, and your narration's great. It's so fun to hear your voice.
I'm really glad to have done it. And I do think actually audiobook is outselling every other mechanism because of that. So it's shown it. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, you ready to Leadership Corner?
Let's do it.
I manage a team where one person is clearly the rock star. Everyone depends on them. They're in every meeting, they solve every crisis, but I'm starting to realize this person is actually a bottleneck, not an asset. How do I transition from celebrating this person to distributing their knowledge without destroying morale or losing them?
Yeah, this is a big one because in some sense you've actually somewhat trained a problem into the system, right? Because you have a person who has built a lot of expertise and also a lot of personal identity and value into this. In past situations, I tend to try a couple different things with this. The most effective one is if you can give that person a new project or goal or task. Because without something new, they're going to just automatically be pulled in. All their discretionary time is going to be pulled in. But what you want to do is you want to create some friction within them towards something they're excited to do so that they're pushing back on all of the redundancy and forcing other people to step up. That is the ideal situation because then you can help them become an expert in something new that you need and keep that energy for them while simultaneously creating the natural forces. There are times when that doesn't work so well, though, because oftentimes there are personality types that really are not interested in taking on something new, and they just keep gravitating back towards being that bottleneck. And in those cases, sometimes I try to force it in a different way, either by assigning someone responsibility to shadow and forcing that other person to start attending those meetings and start being a backup. Sometimes I do it in, a more direct way. So I think you really just have to decide where do you want to put the tension, but you need to put some tension in the system so that the behaviors start to change more strategically without you having to be micromanaging where people spend their time. You really want to help them decide where to spend their time, but give them more pointers on what's high value and what's not high value.
So I'm gonna take a step back a little bit in the spirit of what we were just talking about as well, which is it's not about the person, it's really about the team. As a leader, I spend an outsized amount of time focusing on team dynamics. And how is the team functioning together? How are individuals relating to each other and making sure that everything was cohesive and doing that on a very regular basis. So in this particular case, we don't have all of the details, but presumably this rock star is like a bulldozer and is able to just like get a bunch of stuff done, but is leaving a lot of shrapnel in their wake, maybe causing other people to get annoyed, feeling excluded, all that kind of stuff. And so that means that your team dynamics are not going well, and that is going to hurt you and the rest of the team, including even the rock star, because ultimately that person is not going to succeed in that context. And so you really need to take a step back and think about how do you change the incentives for that person? How do you make sure that that people are appreciating each other's skills and capabilities? Maybe there's a group problem that the team can solve together, where the rock star is involved, but is seeing what other people bring to the table, et cetera. So I would just sort of counterpoint what you were saying, Meg, and it's not just an assignment for that person, but it's actually a group assignment.
I like it.
Cool.
I like it.
All right.
Well, hopefully that's
And
helpful to
rock stars
someone
are
who
great. Like, you want rock stars.
Yeah,
You
ex
just want rock stars that are collaborative.
right.
So find a way to make that rock star collaborative. That's what I would say.
Yeah, but also you wanna not have a single point of failure as well, so you also want to make it part of that incentive structure that rock star recognizes they need to make sure that there's someone else that they're nurturing and mentoring to, gain that expertise as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, big episode, Amy. Thank you so much, Nilofer, for joining us. Let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.